All right. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Welcome to a very dark morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's just the day after Halloween, or the fact that we haven't changed clocks back yet. It feels very dark this morning. All right. Here comes David. Perfect. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. Any public comments for the Conservation Commission meeting this morning?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir. Would you like to identify yourself?
My name is Malcolm Willard. I've lived at 699 North Hill since the early 90s.
Mhm.
And I am hoping to be able to split off a couple of 2-acre lots from my property. One of the things that is required by section 27.5 is that all development, and I'm just skipping over some, will require a habitat disturbance assessment prepared by a qualified wildlife biologist. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is that the biologist or other professional must be contracted by the town. I would like to know why I can't hire my own certified biologist and have a report done. The continuation of that says that who pays for the preparation of the HDA and how much does it cost? It says the applicant pays the town a fee to cover the cost of preparation of the HDA. A copy of the current fee schedule is available from the administrator or on the town website. I am not able to find that on the town website. I called the town clerk yesterday and asked for assistance, and she did not find that. So I would like to address the fact that I would like to provide a qualified report from a qualified person, and is that acceptable to the board?
So I can't speak to whether or not the information is available on the town website.
So I can look into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
As far as the selection of the qualified biologist, that is something that the Conservation Commission considered a year or so ago. something like that.
From February onwards, with the
February
planning
onwards.
commission.
Yeah, and we made that decision to move the responsibility of selecting a qualified biologist to the role of the town to align with similar consultants that in other areas of the town that are required for projects. And we felt it was in the best interest of the town for the town to select a biologist from a group of qualified candidates.
Okay,
This is something that we are requiring.
I understand that. I feel that's confrontational, and I feel it shows distrust to the individuals like myself that I would not provide a qualified person on my own. I can provide a surveyor to have my property surveyed. I can provide a septic engineer to have the septic done. They have to be by licensed people in the state that are respected and recognized, and I'm just offended a little bit by the fact that I can't do that in this case, and that I'm being asked to give the town a blank check for something that I have no idea how much it's going to cost or how long it's going to take or who's going to be doing it.
So that information should be available on the website. So we'll look into that and see what the cost will be.
Yeah, the cost will depend on the size of the parcel, because obviously it takes longer to survey some parcels than others. We won't carry out any HDAs or instruct anyone to do them until we have your agreement to pay the cost. And if you dispute the cost, we can talk about that. We have other areas of the town. So for example, Public Works, when they get a big subdivision, they hire an outside consultant as well to help them review things. And that's essentially the model we're adopting here. And the primary, I mean, it's sort of best summed up. The standard, it will allow like an objective view. The town sort of has no skin in the game one way or the other. They just want an objective view about what the appropriate mitigation measures are and what the impacts are. And so the Conservation Commission talked about this a lot. It went to Planning Commission. It also went to Select Board, and they feel this is the appropriate way forward.
Okay, well, I respectfully disagree with that. So we will carry on, and thank you for your time.
Sure,
Thank you.
thanks for coming
Thank you for
in.
letting us know.
Can I stay for the rest of the meeting?
Okay, any other public comment? All right, then let's roll on into the pre-app for the Glazer subdivision.
Let's just do minutes, quick.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
sorry, minutes. All right, so minutes from October 18th. And I had a motion to approve the minutes from October 18th.
Yeah, I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
Seconded, this is Reed.
Thanks, Reed. Any comments on the or discussion on the motion or comments on the minutes? It's Please, none, all in favor of approving the minutes from October 18th as submitted, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions?
I'll abstain, I wasn't here.
Same.
All right, abstentions from Laura and Kim. All right, thanks, everyone. Okay, now on to the Glazer subdivision.
Yeah.
Now we got Simon's business out of the way.
It's always helpful to get that done.
Yes,
Yeah.
and to follow the agenda.
Yeah.
All right, who's taking the lead on this one?
I can just do a quick overview. There's a staff report which I can share, and I'm sure Ken can help chip in. I mean, I think everyone's by this stage is pretty familiar with this parcel. We talked about it a lot this year. So this is a pre-application review for a residential subdivision. You may recall, it was reviewed several times over the summer, and we did a memo for the planning commission. The planning commission voted to transmit it to the select board for approval. So that's amendments to the bylaw and amendments to the town plan to enable the specific plan to proceed. That is going to be heard for an informational session next week, next November 7th. And this is essentially a pre-app, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, but it can be best summed up as they don't know whether the select board is going to approve this, and because of how our system works, if they don't get a pre-app in by the end of the year, they have to wait until March 2025 to go to growth management. So I believe that's why they're doing this now. And Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, but the specific plan is still your sort of preferred option, I believe.
I see.
That's correct.
So this is the backup if the specific plan is turned down.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah.
Like,
So it needs to go to growth management. There's 3 different options. Option 3 is the I don't think we'll see this. Option 3 is the specific plan layout, and then we've also got 2 additional options. I think this is option 1, which is similar. I guess the main differences are there's more development over here in the view shed, and it links through to Old Stage Road. There's a small little pocket of homes off Turtle Pond Road. and there's more units. I think there's an extra 21 units in comparison to the specific plan for this option. That's based on the residential density of for the RZD of 3 units per acre. And then there's this option, which is very similar to option 1 as you look at it, but it is essentially denser. That goes up to 180 units per acre, and that would be the applicant developing out to, well, below, but similar to the recent state law allowing 5 units per acre in areas served by water and sewer. So that still has the link through to Old Stage Road and development in the viewshed. And then there's one you're more familiar with, which is the specific plan layout, which doesn't have that element by Turtle Pond Road, still has this loop, and then just has this, I guess, lesser development in this northern area, and has the 2 parcels of land, including the viewshed land, which are given over to the town, potentially. So just quick through, it's got an ERF prioritization of high in our prioritization map. There's no desired primitive trails there. It is a significant wildlife habitat area. So that would require the habitat disturbance prepared by a wildlife biologist contracted to the town as part of the discretionary permit. No UREITs or unique natural communities. It is farmland of local importance on the lesser map, but our bylaw does say that protecting farmland in the residential zoning district is not a primary goal there. And then lastly, probably what everyone's most familiar with is the scenic viewshed. So it's got, well, I guess it's got 3 scenic viewsheds. It's got the one to the west where the wetlands are, and then probably the one that everyone's concerned about, which is the view to Camel's Hump from Mountain View Road. So looking towards the southeast, I think that is. And that's the sort of pocket of land in the specific plan that remains undeveloped. No flood zones. The applicant has already delineated all their wetlands, and they're shown on all 3 site plan options. So the development's been planned around those. And we probably have our typical requirements for 50-foot buffer and some way of delineating that on the ground, stop people mowing, etc. And then lastly is the open space. So unlike the ARZD, there's no quantitative minimum requirement for open space. We sort of want to get open space, but consistent with permitting residential development of the allowed density. There are things that you must include in the open space, so that's wetlands and the associated buffers. Things that you should include consistent with beneficial use of the property, which is the strategic wildlife habitat area. And then there's the view sheds, which have partial protection, but we can, with good planning, maximize their protection, but allow development in there. So the site layout options show varying quantities of open space. So options 1 and 2, I think, give us around 52 acres, which are basically the big wetland parcels. And then option 3 gives us those wetland parcels plus the 15 acres of viewshed. So we then have some findings and some recommendations to talk through at the end. Okay. Ken, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think you summarized it well, Simon. I guess couple things that I would just emphasize is that, as I stated in the cover letter that I penned with the submission of the application, the Glazers are still committed to the specific plan. That hasn't changed one iota. This is being filed for 2 reasons. Number one, as you've already alluded to, the way that the Williston residential development review process works is it's tied to the calendar. And you either get a pre-app in before the end of the calendar year, which allows you to participate in growth management in March, or you have to wait a whole other year. While we remain hopeful that the specific plan will be approved by the select board, it ain't over until it's over. As I had said to Jack Glazer when we got our positive recommendation from the planning commission, I used the analogy of the baseball playoffs. I said, we haven't won yet, but we're in the World Series. So you can't win unless you get into the World Series. So that's where we are. But just because you're in the World Series doesn't mean you're going to win. And so you're seeing a more normative development proposal than what you've seen previously as part of the specific plan. So we are committed to the specific plan. The other two development proposals are predicated on a more full build out of the property. As I've mentioned in the past, the view shed area that we're offering for dedication to the town, that area is not it's not impacted by wetlands where much of the property is. So it's really in many ways prime development area. And then the other is the reason why you see two development plans, Simon alluded to this, is that this past spring, the state legislature passed Act 47, which says residential developments in areas served by municipal water and sewer have to allow up to 5 dwelling units per acre. Now, the town's bylaw today says 3 dwelling units per acre, or you can get up to 5 with a density bonus for affordable housing. Act 47 has a different density bonus for affordable housing that's on top of the 5 units per acre. So the town will need to get a legal opinion from the town's attorney on this, as I'm sure all the municipalities are doing this. The state legislature left the cities and towns with no lead time to work all this stuff out, and it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So that's why you have two different what I'll call more conventional development proposals in front of you. But lastly, I just want to mention that, so in one of the maps that Simon's prepared, it talks about wildlife habitat area, which, as I read the map, is sort of coterminous with the area that we've proposed to dedicate to the town. And I know in your prior transmittals to Planning Commission, I don't know that was mentioned. And so that may be worth mentioning, that the dedication of that open space not only preserves the view shed, but it also preserves that wildlife habitat area as well. So having said that, I will stop.
The travel corridor in the top corner.
Okay. Thanks, Ken. I've got a couple of hands up. I guess I'll just ask one clarifying question of Simon. Simon, do you know if the town is looking into that density or dwelling unit change from the state?
So the planning department position is, because we count dwelling units as a dwelling unit equivalent, we already do that. When it goes to DRB in 2 weeks' time, DRB may request a legal opinion on that matter.
Okay, thanks. Gary?
Just wanted to clarify too that, Ken, in the first two plans, does I guess southwest corner, the green part there, does that get dedicated to the town in your first two plans? The wetlands area, basically.
You talking about down near
Well, to the west. Well, yeah, I guess it's mostly southwest.
the southwest,
The green,
right.
the light green color.
Right. Well, that's a good question, Gary. So when the wetlands delineation was done for this property, when it came to the southernmost part of the site, David Burke, who is the principal, said, well, don't, we pretty much think all that is wet. We don't think there's really any, development to be pursued down there. So don't spend any more time or energy taking a look at that. Now, as part of the process, as I recall, that's a pasture area that's used by Windswept Farms. And so it may be upland enough, the part that fronts onto Old Stage Road, where you see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dwelling units. So that would have to be verified by additional wetlands delineation analysis to verify that that is upland and thus suitable for development. But in the specific plan proposal, the town would get that land.
But what about in the first two of your plan? The ones that aren't the specific town proposal, does it get dedicated to the town in those?
Well, that's not part of the proposal at this time.
Okay.
Just remember that we're a pre-app. So pre-app isn't really, it's not an application for a permit. It's a discussion, essentially, with recommendations. So at this point, that has not been discussed.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. Reed?
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, Ken, I was just curious. I know there was the rendering done for option 3, but without a rendering for option 1 and 2, I was curious about the heights of the buildings in that northeast corner.
Well, typically
In the viewshed area, basically.
Right, I understand. So what that would look like from Mountain View Road, I couldn't give you the answer to that, but the maximum height in the zoning district is 35 feet. That said, a typical dwelling unit being built today would come in at a height of somewhere between 28 to 30 feet. If you could look around any relatively new development in Williston, and you would see, the peak of the roof would be somewhere in the order of, 28 to 30 feet.
And I recognize this is a pre-app, so you guys don't have all the details about the structures and stuff. It's conceptual, but
yeah,
I think that's one of the things that at discretionary permit would be, a key point of discussion is just how tall are those structures, so that we can find a balance in our recommendations around viewshed, while still obviously allowing appropriate density.
We're hopeful that we won't have to do that because the specific
Right.
plan will be approved.
Yep. And it's a lot more work. Yep.
Thank you, Reed and
Thanks,
Ken, for
Eric.
that. Yep. Any other questions? We can roll through,
Mike Moss.
oh,
Mike, yeah, do you want to have anything, do you want to say anything or make any comment?
Well, first I have a vested interest.
Okay, do you want to just make sure everyone introduce yourself so everyone knows who you
Okay,
are?
I'm Mike Moss and my wife and I own Windswept Farm. So obviously I have a vested interest in maintaining my business, which requires the pasture land. So the earlier, no, I guess it's option 1 and 2. It shows a small group of houses right next to Turtle Pond, which is in the midst of one of the pastures, so that, would cease to exist. That probably, is about 20% of the pasture land we use. A significant law. I think the town, if the town approves the specific plan, I think it's a win-win situation because they're getting a lot of open land. They're keeping a working landscape, myself in business. It has fewer homes, lesser traffic. But if you go to 1 and 2, you multiply the number of homes, all of these things go up exponentially. And so basically, I hope the specific plan gets through. I think it's the best option for the town. And I think it's the best option for all of us who enjoy driving down that road and seeing those mountains. And I think that's about all I would have to say.
okay, thank you. All right, shall we review the findings and recommendations?
Yeah.
All right, I think, I don't know that we need to go through the findings one by one. We can if anyone would like to. I think they're all pretty straightforward. As I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, we're all pretty familiar with the project at this point. Anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns they'd like to raise with any of the findings?
The issue about trails,
Which finding is that one?
I'm just curious, I know that we said in the specific plan it wasn't suitable for the multi-use pathway to the west of the development, but you know, connecting trails are connecting trails. And there was no primitive path or like
Not
right
on the
of
map.
ways
Yeah, not on the map,
granted.
not on the primitive trails map that we used to guide like primitive trails decisions.
Yeah,
On the official map, there's a multi-use path that comes through. It's supposed to come through at some point and connect up to Old Stage Road.
right, okay. Now, I saw in the drawings, renderings, they still have the multi-use path on Mountain View Road, which is in the town map.
Yeah.
So they have to do that.
Yeah.
Were there any other contemplated pathways through the development? I see the connector. But like, what about like the actual street areas?
Meaning like sidewalks or?
Sidewalks or, you know, like around the like Zephyr Road style.
So they've got, I think all three options still show their like their connector trail that connects the two areas of the so I think got too many screens open.
Yeah, there's a lot of documents for this project.
Yeah, so so option one still has that, see it there, it's that path that they're proposing for the specific plan
Yep,
that connects you through from Mountain View Road to this area in Old Stage Road, and it has the their section of the multi-use path on Mountain View Road.
yep. So I guess my question is for Ken. In the specific plan, because the western parcel is being donated to the town, there isn't really a need for a talk about future easements to connect with you know, future pathways to the west. Is there any discussion of in this pre-app process, would an easement for a future connective path be contemplated?
Well, so typically what happens is that as part of the review process with commentary from you folks, and then through the DRB process, you typically get something like a request for a floating easement for some sort of a path connection. And, you know, I think we would anticipate something like that would come along. And then with that easement would, you know, offer a potential tie into that multi-use path connecting the two development areas that's shown on the map. So that would be something that you folks may want to, you know, consider as a recommendation, that there would be a floating easement to connect that. But on the question of sidewalks are required. They're just required, and so and on both sides of the street. So if you were to really drill down, you'd see that there's sidewalks in those sections along those proposed new streets. The town is not desirous of a sidewalk along Mountain View Road. Old Stage Road. So there's not one that's proposed there because it's not something that the town wants. There's a big ditch. If you ever walk down there, you'll see there's a big drainage ditch that is parallel to the roadway itself.
Thank you for answering the question of about the floating easement. I think that certainly tracks with my understanding as well. So I guess, so Simon, that would not be part of the pre-app review, that would come later if.
It would be part of the staff review to get a floating easement for the multi-use path. So they would make the staff, Emily, who's writing the staff report at the moment, will probably include that
Okay,
in her recommendations.
okay, so that would be for essentially that western.
It would follow the official map. So the official map shows it like right in the south. I can probably bring it up. Hold on.
I understand the point about the easement for Mountain View Road, but I'm asking about the connectivity.
David,
so
I would also just say I would be looking to have a conversation at the discretionary permit stage about where an easement, a floating easement or something like that would make sense, because if the town isn't going to receive that light green area that we saw, then we need to be able to negotiate later.
Yeah, thanks, Reed.
So that's the
I see.
official map that shows the multi-use path, essentially connecting in with the existing one that comes south of Northridge.
Yeah.
So we've got an easement all the way through to there.
So that's where that.
Closer to Turtle Pond.
Yeah.
Yeah, so staff report would reflect the addition of that floating easement.
Yeah.
Obviously not something that this developer would construct, though.
Well, that's a decision for the DRB. I mean, I'd probably guess not, but I don't know. I mean, they're already constructing the one up here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions on the findings? Okay, moving on to recommendations. Same question here. We can go through the recommendations one by one if you'd like, if anyone would like, or just take open questions.
So I guess, is there anything that you think I've missed? And then do you wanna, that's probably the one that is slightly is probably the most one that maybe you should just have a look at and check you're happy with.
Yeah,
Okay,
6
all the
is what I
others-
was asking about, Simon.
Yeah, the others are all fairly standard from your point of view, the RCD. It's the just options 1 and 2 which do develop in the view shed. Like, do you want to wordsmith that or have any particular comments on how that's phrased?
Can we hear from Ken how the applicant has contemplated options 1 and 2 for this exact question?
Well, you know, options 1 and 2 are going through the conventional development review process. And as such, we would anticipate in the unhoped for event that we have to do that, we would get commentary both from you and from the DRB for what those requirements would be. You know, that said, I can tell you from my own walking of the property back this past spring, that in terms of the view shed of Camel's Hump, that's really the best view of Camel's Hump from Mountain View Road is really across the really the northwesternmost corner of the property. And so there would be likely to be some preservation of that view, clearly not of the same caliber as what's being proposed on the specific plan. But other than that comment, you know, it's the focus on the development proposals is say, okay, well, here's what the zoning allows. how can we utilize the upland land that's available after doing the wetlands delineation to potentially maximize the development potential?
Thanks, Ken. You talked a little bit about, on this point of the northwest corner being the best view shed, we've already talked about units 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the southern parcel, but we haven't actually talked about these 8 additional units in the northwest parcel. And maybe I'm not zoomed in close enough, but I can't actually tell the difference. So I think option 1 has them as being 1-story duplexes, and option 2, I can't tell. Is that 2-story?
Yeah, so that, from what I see, the main differences between the two options are option 1, those are single-story duplexes in the northwest corner, and then that road that would lead run parallel to Mountain View would be no, how am I looking at that? Yeah, 2 stories, and then the option 2 would be 2-story duplexes in the northwest corner, and then 2-story duplexes running down Mountain View as well.
Yeah, there's some 4-plexes and 3-plexes. And all 3-plexes in the second option, which is the denser option. I think it looks like everything's 2-story in that area.
You know, what I would say is that in terms of the height of the buildings, whether a building is 1 or 2 stories, the overall height of the structure probably wouldn't be any different. We might be talking about a 28 versus a 30-foot maximum height, but the difference in the height of the structure per se would be minuscule. And I can just tell you, there's all kinds of dwelling units in Williston that I've been through, as part of my work for the town, where you look at 2 buildings and they look virtually identical from the street, and then you go inside and one has some livable area in the second story, perhaps with dormers, but the other one just has pre-manufactured trusses, which means it's essentially a space, it's an insulated space, not even an attic, because if you've ever seen those pre-manufactured roof trusses come in, they're framed in such a way that you can't really walk through them. So, but in terms of the view shed, you probably wouldn't see much of a difference in terms of the actual height of the structures.
Thanks, Ken. Any other questions or comments on the recommendations?
I'm good, Eric.
Thanks, Reed.
So Simon, you're back to wanting to wordsmith on.
Oh, well, it was more like, I know this was everyone's concern, so I just wanted to make sure everyone talked about it before we sent the recommendation to the DRB.
Thank you.
I think it reads fine.
I think it reads fine. And I guess the only addition to the recommendation I might consider is what I guess Reed and I were just referring to about that western easement, but if Emily's going to take care of that on the
yes,
floating.
I mean it's a multi-use path, not a trail,
right.
So that would normally be a staff recommendation to take care of that, and then it's on the official map, so it has to be dealt with one way or the other. It can't just be ignored. We have to either have an easement or they have to build it, and it doesn't go anywhere at the moment. So my guess is probably an easement, but I don't know.
So not a trail, so not a multi-use path.
Right. Whether we should have a mobility committee is a whole other conversation.
Yeah, and David, I'm interested in a primitive trail easement east-west through that light green area, but I'm interested in discussing it when we get to discretionary permit stage, not this kind of super early stage.
Great. Bookmark it.
All right. Excellent. Anything else on this before we go to a vote to approve?
I'll move approval of the recommendations as drafted, Eric.
Great, thanks, Reed.
Second, Gary.
Second from Gary. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor of the motion to approve the pre-app for the Glazer subdivision, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Thanks for coming in, Ken.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
That puts us ahead of schedule.
It does. Well done, team.
I wasn't sure how many people were gonna show up for this one, so, just Mike. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you
Right,
all.
good
Have a
night,
good
bye,
day.
thank you, Mike. Okay, that gets us to our next agenda item, town plan, chapter 4 review. So how do we do on the Google survey for this?
We got 5 and I checked on maybe Monday night, so let me just.
Yeah, I did a review yesterday.
Okay, so we got lots.
I couldn't remember if I filled it out or not. I was thinking I had. Let's see, my results are in here.
I did not fill it out.
So these results summaries break it down by responder, so
Yeah,
Terry. you
Yeah,
start
it was-
with Terry's not
It was
here.
kind of hard to like, I was reading through the results and it was hard because it's by responder rather than by topic.
so happily,
We're trying to find a way, it's not too much work for Simon, but still easy enough to tell who made what comments.
Right.
Kim,
Yeah, I
so
don't
sorry
know.
about that.
No, I mean, I
So-
think it's fine. It's just it would be cool if we could see like where there's consensus. But maybe it's such a small number of respondents that it doesn't matter.
Lauren, did you get a chance to?
yeah, I did.
Oh, I don't see it on.
anyone who responded after I sent out the agenda will not be in that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
what we've also got, I can display it in a better way online. I just can't
Yeah,
transmit that in a format that you can review it.
okay,
Okay.
So
Yeah,
can
sorry,
you
yeah, then.
blow it up on there?
yeah, we'll just discuss it here then. Thanks.
All right.
So
So,
this is like the design chapter, which has several parts of interest to the Conservation Commission, some more so than others. So the urban parks in places like Taft Corners, we have an objective 4.4 on those. So lots of responses here. Just generally a lot of support for them, making sure they're planned in and well designed. And we do actually get them in the end in the way that was originally suggested. I think so, a lot of support for the value they provide, and then some discussion about they should provide some element of habitat as well. Is the overall feeling I got from that. I haven't read what Gary said.
Simon, the current, what I guess I was struggling with in this, in answering urban parks in particular was, is urban park like the Diamond Town Center next to the movie theater, or is an urban park more like the fields behind Allenbrook?
It would be probably the most recent one is I guess it would be like the Maple Place square, or the new park that they put in with Finney outside Railroad and Main, that has the swings in it and the big spheres.
Okay,
So those would be urban parks.
okay. So is habitat, so what would habitat options look like in a park like that, other than
I mean,
native
they-
planting?
Yeah, they'd be limited because the primary objective, I think, is to provide a space for people who work in that area or live in that area to hang out.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think, you know, we already have like our tree species, which are supposed to be like native trees. So those parks should have, well, the Finney Park should have those. I don't know what they have in Military Place because it predates all that stuff.
Right,
It should have those.
thank you.
So what is, looking at that comment about Finney Crossing as an example of what not to do, what did, having, not being all that familiar with Finney Crossing, what did Finney Crossing do or not do?
So, I mean, I didn't make that comment, but
Yeah, not necessarily regular use.
I can comment on that, Eric.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that happened is there was a pretty large urban park planned with the Finney Crossing development, and then over the phases of build out and application, discretionary permit application and so on, it shrunk and shrunk, and now with the hotel it's going in, there's going to be basically like a pocket park. But it was originally supposed to be a big one, like in the middle of Maple Tree Place.
Yeah, it was supposed to have a big amphitheater and all that kind of stuff, if I remember
And
correctly.
and of course, you know, the form-based code changes are going to fix that in the growth center, but that doesn't help elsewhere. So I just want to make sure that we're not leaving a gap for the next, when we think about the town plan, not leaving a gap, and we continue to make sure that appropriate facilities are provided.
okay, thanks, Reed.
Can I say something, Eric?
Yeah.
One thing I put that I didn't see anybody else mention is just thinking about shade.
Yes.
And just because summers are getting hotter and I think people are gonna appreciate it, whether it's a structure or a tree. And I've been walking through New York City a lot. I don't know if you've ever spent time walking through their parks. Their parks are really beautiful and there are trees, and underneath the trees, there's native habitat, a lot of native plantings, and there are benches and places for people to sit. And in front of the skyscrapers, they make public parks, and they're not always full of plantings, but they certainly have features where people can just sit, there's shade, and it's just, you know, and it says this is a public park. And so buildings are required to have these public parks. And it's really nice to just walk down 6th Avenue and have park after park and see people sitting at these public parks. That, you know, a business isn't, or a development isn't saying, this is our park, get out.
I wrote in my comment that it needs to be signed as a park.
Yeah, I agree, I
Because,
said that too.
Oh, great. I mean, because otherwise you don't know. And you don't know if you're sort of allowed to sit in the shade and.
Right, it should say this is a public park, and that's what they put on every single park in front of these buildings on 6th Avenue, so. That's what I liked about it.
I wanna back up the comment about providing shade and just say that I agree that people will appreciate it, and also there's a lot of research on street trees providing shade and combating heat islands under climate change, which will have real health consequences for people. And I think it's something that we should be thinking about proactively. So I totally support that position, Laura.
Yeah, it's the classic GIS exercise that to map street trees versus like street temperatures, and see how they correspond. And then they also map it against like people's income, and predictably the poorer areas have fewer trees in general overall. It's always an interesting.
Yeah, and then you can add like health outcome layers like asthma and heart attack, and it also lines up pretty clearly. So it's kind of like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So I wanted to comment briefly about the substance-free
Yeah,
info that was in there. As I put in here, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I think they all should be substance-free and should be involved with substance-free events. I don't know why they put that they may be substance-free. I suggest, unless there's a unique situation that might require a permit, that they all should be substance-free.
Substance free means no alcohol, no smoking, no
Right.
marijuana.
The
Okay.
example I was thinking
guess-
about the most, Gary, with this was like, we got breweries now in Vermont, in Williston, they might want to host an event where they want to,
Yeah,
you know, allow people to purchase beer or something, so that's.
yeah, I think if there's a possibility, if you have to have something like that, or you want to, there should be a permit that's required.
Mhm.
Which is the case with other properties, right? Like my husband hosts a bike race at Catamount and it has a beer garden at it and he gets a permit. And then the person that's serving the beer has to pull a license from, it's actually like really cost prohibitive. Like the beer gets donated from Lawson's and we still lose money on it.
But I think that's good. I think we want to discourage that if possible, particularly,
Yeah.
you
So
know, in these parks where people are going to be trying to enjoy themselves. They don't want somebody smoking a cigarette 10 feet away, or we don't want it to become a place where there's drug issues and things like that, if we can help
Right.
it.
So would we, I guess I'm wondering, like, would extending what exists at other places be sufficient, or do we need to go a step further than that?
So a step further would be just, I guess the way I see it is, Cam, is a step further would be. Just an outright ban on
Mhm.
substances in these spaces without the option for a permit for a special
Well, I
event.
guess I'm wondering if that's what whoever wrote, so there's like multiple, I think, substance-free comments. Is that what people meant? Is that what people want to see? Like,
Yeah.
I can imagine a scenario where it's like, there's alcohol allowed at some places in town with a permit, and then there's like other places where it's like actually not a great place for a beer garden. I don't know.
I wrote those comments, at least some of them, Kim, and I would agree that there should be a ban on them. You know, and I don't know about I suppose we could have an option for a required permit for certain events.
I think they do have to get an alcohol license as part of their catering permit. I don't know, but I think they do. I don't think you can just pitch up and sell alcohol as your event without a permit from the town and state.
And I think it's also about like people bringing
Yes.
substances
Yeah.
to that space. So I think having my view, Gary, is that it should be dealt with through policy, and that it should say it's a substance-free space without a permit, and then let the permitting process be defined by whatever the town manager, whatever is appropriate to make sure that it's, there's going to be appropriate oversight and stuff like that.
I agree, Reed. Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone. Other comments on urban parks on 4.4?
It's nice to be talking about things we don't usually talk about. That's my only comment.
I was just thinking that too. I was thinking this is a little bit out of our purview, and then I realized
Yes.
that's okay for today.
Yeah.
So then the way we're going to do this is just have a look at all the various criteria, which are quite extensive for urban parks. And just what people thought about that. I think there was a general feeling that they were focused on recreation and some of the elements which they could include, like fitness stations, or again biodiversity, and requiring.
I love seeing people out, exercising and stuff. I think that creates a really positive environment. So I love like along the bike path in Burlington where they have the workout stations, and I see sometimes people use them just to hang out on, to sit on a seat on a workout station. But other people are out there, really exercising. I think both things are positive.
So both physical health and mental health, I guess you
Yeah.
could somehow incorporate or at least understand.
It gives reason for people to stay in the park too, rather than just pass through. If there's an activity to do, especially with kids and stuff, I think it's a positive.
Yeah, that's a problem with the Maple Tree Park. It's almost a desert. You never see people.
What do you do
throwing
there?
pitches.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, what do you do? The sidewalks are in the way.
There's so many sidewalks in that park, there's almost no grass or trees for that matter. Yeah. You know, I had a question in reading that policy. I don't know if I wrote it in the survey or not, but certainly reading it in this moment. What does this mean? You know, maybe what just happened at Maple Tree Place, or that explanation that was provided by I think Reed was explaining it. Urban parks should be sized appropriately and in proportion to the size and intensity of the development they are a part of. That sounds real swishy to me, like, without any guidance or teeth. Like, how would any committee in the world be able to interpret what that actually means? So
Yeah, I think that's I can't remember if it was my comment or not, but that last bullet of the four dash bullets up there, is there appropriate sizing guidance available for developers?
Right.
Well, I think that's what I was thinking too.
yeah, so I mean, like, for something like this to be implementable and to not have a mistake, like what was just described to us, there does need to be like a size requirement, you know, whether that's square footage of designated park for every square footage of or dwelling unit that's built or something like that. There needs to be some kind of there needs to be some guidance developed around this goal. Otherwise, it's not going to be implemented.
A few years ago, the Park Service started this initiative that I can't remember what it was called, but it was around urban parks owned by the Park Service, like Golden Gate. It was called now I can't remember. Anyway, I feel like they had characteristics of what attracted people to come and stay in urban parks. And I'm trying to find the general technical report that came out of that, because it's obviously the scale is different, but maybe there's some size to population usefulness. If I find it, I'll put it in the chat. I feel like it was the new urban agenda or something.
You're right. Google says it's called the Urban Agenda Call to Action Initiative.
Yes.
Very good, Ken.
Sometimes my brain works.
Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, we should be paying attention to whether somebody else has already figured these things out. What is the right sizing?
Yeah, I think they're a bunch of the work that they did was around looking at how come even when we have parks in super racially diverse parts of the country, the people who visit are still largely white. It was around relevance to diverse communities, but I feel there were also things about crowding and infrastructure, and I can't remember the whole suite, but maybe Eric has it up now.
Try that. There we go. Yeah, they don't have it organized, a way to quickly get information. A lot of pictures though.
A lot of fundraising pamphlets.
I don't know, maybe it's not useful. I just thought it could possibly be.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think maybe someone could take a minute to dive deeper into their webpage on it. That's just not. There's not something I see quickly that answers your questions instantly, Ken.
I'm gonna look and see if there's also a general technical report that came out of it. If there is one, I'll put it in the chat.
The larger point, it sounds like we're in agreement on, is that something as specific as setting aside land in an urban park needs to be a quantifiable directive for development and not something squishy that is subject to interpretation of someone trying to maximize their sale value and not necessarily thinking about the development of an urban park.
Yeah, I agree. There should be some minimums.
Yeah.
Per whatever criterion, whether it's dwelling unit or something else.
Yeah, but there has to be a lot more just because of this just size. It's gonna be a mown lawn with lots of sidewalks.
Agreed. Okay.
Cool, all right.
Neighborhood parks.
Yeah, anything else on urban parks before we move on? Okay. How do we feel about neighborhood parks?
Love them. Let's keep them.
Living in a neighborhood where our neighborhood park is pretty poor, don't love them. But I think that just reflects how, how widely it can range. We have a gazebo and some mowed grass.
Yeah,
And so it's just the same problem as Maple Tree Place, where it's like you go there and you're like, what am I supposed to do here? And there's no
Yeah,
shade.
Yeah. Mm.
So I think one of my questions about these things, and for instance, it comes up a little bit with the option 1 or 2 with Glazer that we just looked at. The connector, multi-use path connector between the 2 areas of the development, you know, had some recreation facilities listed and stuff, but those are recreation facilities that are not intended to be public, and yet they're, you know, they're on a bike path, and people are probably going to bike through there if they're, you know, looking to do a little loop with their family or something. And so I would like to see more effort or more potential for neighborhood parks to become a network of public parks throughout the town, so that people feel like they can just move from space to space and always have somewhere that they can be outdoors, that they can be safe, and have a good interaction with the park. So I find neighborhood parks to be hit or miss and serve very few people at a time because they're private.
I think, yeah, well, that's what I was gonna say. So like, I think our neighborhood has like the opposite experience of you, where it was like, our neighborhood was built, I think, before really people realized that they could like optimize every square footage, and like, we have so much land that doesn't have houses on it. Where, for folks who haven't been to LaFave Lane, it is
You have
the
an awesome
neighborhood.
park.
Yeah, the neighborhood is basically a number 9, right? Where the houses are all around the outside of like the circle of the 9. And then the inside is just green space, and there's a tennis court and there's a playground, and there, like, the green space is actually like
Mature
huge. Like,
trees.
right, matured, some of them are failing, which is an issue. But and then above that number 9, where there are no houses, there's another plot of community land, and up there is like a community garden and a chicken coop, and then just like a bunch of open space that we end up, you know, we have some fruit trees in there, we end up mowing a bunch of it because there's like a lot of sumac. And there's, I think there in our neighborhood there's more open space, more space as like communal open space than the individual lots. Like, the lots are really small, and then most of it, and it's managed by our HOA. However, it is private, right? Like, our road is private, and there are people who will come from other neighborhoods and like come up and ask if they can play with their kids on our like on our swing set, and nobody ever says no to them. But you are like walking into a private HOA if you wanted to use it. And I think like at this point there's probably 8 or 9 kids in the neighborhood who are utilizing that open space, and it would like super change the dynamic of the neighborhood if there were more people. So I feel like there's like something to talk, like right now I can send my kids outside and like actually not have eyes on them and trust that they're safe, because we live on a private road and nobody's coming up here that doesn't live here. But I think like there's like 2 components of what Reed said, which is like the spaces need to be like welcoming and optimized, and then like, is there a way to like link them so that like they can be, or like promote them so that like people can know if it is public or if it is a private. Like, I'm thinking of the one, there's like a playground on Brennan Woods that's like, I've never seen, I like run past it and I've never seen anybody playing on it, and it looks like it's like a neighborhood park.
That park is actually a Williston park.
Is it really?
Yeah.
See, like, I think this maybe harkens back to that like need for signage. So yeah, I
or
think
bike
like,
paths that lead to it from
yeah,
the village. Yep.
right, yeah. So I think it's like, I don't know, I think there's like two separate things bound up in that, which is like making nice neighborhood parks and then like making nice neighborhood parks that people can access and know exist.
Okay. Thanks, Kim. I agree that LaFave Lane model is nice. It's a really cool layout in there.
Eric, one suggestion here is that, you know, with the town plan, we don't have to be prescriptive. It's really about saying what we want the town to be like, and then allow staff and committees to figure out how to make that happen. So I think to sum up all of this, I would just say, I would like the town to explore how to make parks better labeled, better mapped, more connected to, you know, recreation paths, and also find out whether there's opportunities to make more of the parks publicly accessible, so that we have a network of parks rather than a network of paths that lead to nowhere.
Okay.
To Reed's point, maybe like another about like usership, maybe another thing to like just nod to, and I don't think we have to say how, but like parks that are like enjoyable by across multi generations. Because like the other thing I'm thinking of is like the folks that live in our neighborhood who are retired and don't have kids and like wouldn't go to a playground, they still use our open space a lot to garden. And so can we like have some language that's like we want them to be like attractive and beneficial across generations
For all ages.
yeah.
All right. Anything else on neighborhood parks? All right, urban forestry. So part of this is focusing on street trees and new developments and existing roads. And maintaining trees in parks and on the grounds of municipal buildings. Any thoughts on this one?
We have a couple foresters, I think, on the committee, Eric, so.
We do, look at that. Any thoughts, foresters, on this one?
More trees are better.
Yeah, there's some interesting, I mean, diversifying street trees and then being good habitat. I guess there'd also be Laura's comment about providing shade. And then also, this might have been Terry's, I guess, given how much she was involved at Catamount, talking about their ability to educate and provide research opportunities. So general support, we could do better with our street trees, I think is.
I made a
Okay.
comment in there about education. I think it's a great opportunity through signage to use the urban setting to talk about nature. So I would like to see that somewhere in our next town plan.
Yeah, I mean, the signage thing is quite interesting. For those of you who haven't been up to Catamount yet, Ethan's done a load of signs for his forestry project.
Yeah, they're great.
Explain like exactly why things have happened, why some trees have been left, why others were cut. It's really useful.
Okay.
I had a question for Kim or Gary. So, Kim, or Gary, I don't know really anything about street trees or trees in general, but I do know that, for an urban forest to function, there needs to be trees and there needs to be plants under them so that insects on the trees have somewhere to fall into, so that they can overwinter. Is that hard on a street with salt? Is it just something that, forget it, just have a street tree and mown grass under it?
But
Gary,
I'll comment briefly. For the tree, from the tree standpoint, different species have different salt tolerances. So I think that's important that when we are planting trees where there's going to be a considerable amount of salt, that we choose from a list of trees that are salt tolerant. You know, I don't know quite as much about the plants underneath. Obviously, there's going to be a fair bit of salt right next to the road, which is usually where these trees are. So I'll let Kim comment on that if she knows anything about it.
I was gonna say something similar, and then also just add that like the Midwestern states have been, like, some of the, you know, the bigger cities in Midwestern states have been dealing with and asking this question for a historically longer period of time. So maybe looking to places in Michigan and Minnesota that have had like pretty robust urban street tree campaigns and deal with a lot of road salt. And then the other place that I know there's like a lot of consideration of impacts on road salt on roadside vegetation is actually in Adirondack Park, and there's an organization called ADK Action that's leading an initiative to look at the impact of like over salting on roadside vegetation. But yeah, I mean, it like essentially burns the vegetation.
Yeah.
So I kind of think people are like learning about it right now. Like, I'm not sure that there's like super great guidelines yet. Do you feel like that's true, Gary?
Well, there have been studies done, and they have salt-free zones and things like that, and they look at the issues related to that, like number of accidents, as well as the impacts on surrounding trees. You know, I think that's a good thing to think about. I don't know where if or where it fits into this. Is a town thinking about reducing salt on their roads? I know it's an issue with safety, but there's proven studies that if people just slow down a little bit, there won't be a massive increase in accidents. But people always want to go, you know, the speed limit or above. So that's more of a kind of social issue than anything we can correct, I think.
Laura,
Thank
I
you.
hadn't even thought about your perspective about, insects and stuff. And I had made a comment in that one that Tyler did there, or maybe in another section about that our urban open spaces or urban forests should allow species to move through the urban setting. And to your point, if we want bird species to, be in the urban setting, then they need food, and most of them are going to be looking for things like insects. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, it's called soft landings, if you ever look it up.
Yeah. Who's the guy, a big entomologist who?
Doug,
Doug.
tell me, yes.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a good guy.
I
Thank
had
you.
another quick comment. Somewhere in here, I think there was some claims made about the value of trees, and I think it was this urban park one about that seemed a little bit extreme to me, like that they're going to clean the air and all this stuff. I think there's perhaps some value to that, but they kind of said if you include a buffer of trees, that will have an increase in air quality that will come from it. So I think that maybe a little bit overstated. I can't remember exactly if I commented on that or I had it somewhere in here. It was 4.2.1. Maybe that was way earlier. I don't know where we are. Oh, we're at 4.7.
There are more questions in the forestry section. I don't know. And some of them look directly from Simon as well.
Yeah, maybe we'll come to it.
Yeah, it's not crucial. It's just claims that seemed extreme to me.
So where was I? Lost my spot. 4.7.1, continue to require and maintain street trees, require greater diversity of tree species. What do we have for responses in there?
Just general support for diversity of street trees, but also maybe looking and making sure, like, just because I think the town changed its regulations probably over a decade ago now to incorporate more diversity and stop planting like 60% ash and things like that. So now we refer back to the Vermont Community and Urban Forest Guide on selecting trees, which is a very usable guide. It's really good. But again, alluding to the point we had, there's only so many trees that are going to work in the right way, because they've got to be so salt tolerant and they've got to be pretty robust.
And they can't have huge wide canopies because you don't want them touching structures and stuff.
Yeah.
One other thing on this topic is that oh shoot, I had it. Keep going.
Well, I'm not a tree specialist, so I can't really tell the difference between a lot of the trees, especially when they're young. And so I'll rely on all of you with more knowledge to tell me if recent developments are more diverse and how you can even judge that. I know that just walking my neighborhood, you have the same tree for like 10 trees in a row, and then it switches for like 5 trees, and then it switches again, so it's like, it was clear that I don't know if we call that diversity, but like 5 and 5 and 10 in a row doesn't seem diverse to me. It would seem like that may sort of meet a threshold, but if it were alternating, if it was more dispersed, that would feel more diverse to me, but I don't know. I would.
I mean, we have it like it's set out in our guidelines that we're only allowed a certain proportion of one. I don't fully understand trees, but like there's all the different Latin names. So they're like one classification going back. So you can have different types of oaks, but you can't have 100% oaks. You have to have 3 different types of oaks, but then also some maples or something like that. But I think because you live in Brenham Woods, don't you? So Brenham Woods is pre them changing the bylaws.
Okay.
So that was more of a developer choice, probably.
Yeah, more of a developer choice. But it is something we do look at in development review. I remember spending a painful 2 hours on Newport Phase 2, making sure the trees were correct trees.
Yeah. What kind of trees did they go with?
Well, a lot of their stuff was like in the back where they plow snow into their landscape buffers. So it's making sure that those trees, it's not just street trees, it's the trees in the landscape buffers, are both diverse, but also are not just going to get smashed by the salt and the snow loads.
I remember what I forgot, Simon, if I could add it now.
Yeah.
Eric. And that is that we have to take care of our trees as well. So we've been talking about arborist service and things like that. I think the next town plan needs to say that the town needs a proactive strategy for having professional maintenance of urban trees, including street trees, and that there needs to be succession planning. We need to be replacing trees before they before we have areas where a whole bunch are phasing out all at once. So
yeah, so we sort of skipped over looking.
We're a city still thinking we're a town, basically, and we got to get ahead of it.
Yeah, I totally agree, Reed. That's good.
On that point, that person could review, like that whoever, if we hired an arborist, that person could review plans for new plantings that would include like position and species, like a range of other factors. Because like at the end of the day, I think like Gary and I both don't work in urban settings. I don't know, Gary, you can tell me if you feel like if we think about like the range of like landscape forest planning, I feel like I'm in like the most rural possible end of like parks and protected area. So, it's a different level. It's a different type of expertise. So like maybe that person could oversee things on the front end, and that would let them be like, well, here's what I can manage best.
Yeah, I think they should do more than review. I think they should be involved in developing these plans if we do come up with an arborist, because I know we've got some expertise in the town group, but I think an arborist would be really valuable in in that sense.
Yeah, another thing that an arborist, unless it's gotten better, I know in the report that, they did in 2007, the tree committee that got together. A lot of the trees that had been planted were over mulched and dying. So, I mean, taking a look at that
Yeah.
and just making sure that the trees that were planted are actually gonna survive and are being maintained.
People love putting mulch under their trees.
Yeah,
And also the height of the base of the tree during planting is often they're put too far into the ground.
right. So that could be something, yeah, an arborist could look at.
Okay, all good feedback. Simon, did you say we skipped a section?
No, sorry, I was just making the point that we were saying about arborists, but we sort of just went over.
Okay.
We didn't pick that up in the previous, it was something that people said. So maintaining the tree inventory, just general support for this at varying degrees.
My comment was a question, which is for what part of Williston and,
The urban area in the LCD, you wouldn't do it for the rural area.
okay. It'd be a lot.
Be out there for a while.
Five Tree Hill.
Yeah. You out there for a while. Okay.
Yeah, so we'd have what, I think it would encompass like the state definition of, I think they call them shade trees, which is anything in the right of way and anything on municipal grounds.
Yeah.
So we look at the cemeteries, town hall, library.
Hennick.
Yeah, well, no, that's not.
It
That
depends
wouldn't
on whether it becomes a what kind of park it becomes or something, but
right. So I think is that something everyone thinks is important. The urban forestry plan in 2007. So I did have a quick look. It's generally, you know, encouraging good maintenance, education, and species diversity. So I think we did do the species diversity improvements following the adoption of the community forest plan, which is good. You know, maintenance is ongoing and would benefit from a professional member of staff on for the town to manage all these issues that come up. And, you know, to Gary's point, you know, when developers are planting trees, go out and watch them whilst they're doing it to make sure it's going in at the right height and that sort of thing.
Okay. So, yeah, maybe it's, who's responsible for the community forestry plan? Is that us or Public Works?
It's
Somebody
not, well, again, this is like one of these things where I think there's certain elements of it that are taken forward by different bodies. So we working with Public Works, we've taken forward this street tree diversity back in 2009, whenever it was done. Yeah.
I actually think it's kind of a good thing that there's overlap, because it's a reason that we should have a relationship between Department of Public Works and Conservation Commission. Is there's habitat and you know, value there, and then there's also the, you know, how does it function in terms of like clearing the rights of way and so on. So I actually think that's a good thing, that it's not exactly all DPW or all Conservation Commission, and having a professional arborist on staff, if they report it up through the Department of Public Works, I think that would be a good thing, and they would be working with us to manage these types of things.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the only downside I see is there's not one group or entity assigned to
Yeah,
maintain.
it can fall by the wayside easily. Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe that should be a recommendation in here to assign somebody the responsibility of keeping the plan up to date in coordination with whoever the other groups are that should be involved.
Right. The more I think about this arborist thing, the more I think we could probably come up with like enough work for 2 people to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if the town were to establish an arborist position, that would make sense for that position to maintain the plan, but until then. Yeah. Okay,
For now, we could just
EAB.
simply say that it should be updated, that the plan should be updated.
Yep. All right, implement EAB preparedness plan.
So, I mean, one thing I think people were interested in is more communication around this issue. Outreach as it's ongoing. Whether we could have done interplanting of species to sort of get a jump start on that aspect.
This is like not super pertinent to this specific thing because I don't think it's even in the town right of way, but when I drive from Top Corners up into the village and I come to the, up the hill by the church there, and then I start going through town, I just notice how many ash trees there are on private land directly adjacent to the road and how denuded that entrance to the village is gonna look if they aren't treated. And I wonder about like, this would be where I would love for a town arborist to reach out to those homeowners and be like, hey, would you like to partner to preserve some of these ash trees and or preemptively, would you like some guidance to preemptively start planting replacement trees so you're not left with an empty yard?
You're here.
I agree, although I'm not as keen on treating them. I would suggest, because it would cost so much to be doing large areas like that. But I think the latter thing that you suggested of, let's develop a planting plan that we could start immediately so that it doesn't look as barren when the ash trees finally mostly die.
But if individual homeowners want to treat, I think that's what Rita's talking about, is like the private yards that are right. Like, so we have 2 huge ash trees in our yard and we treat them, and it's like $200 every 3 years.
Yeah.
I think that's
a good thing.
Providing people that information is,
it's really more about the fact that I think homeowners don't know and aren't thinking ahead. And so where the town is doing that, it's just a benefit that we could offer to reach out to people who have prominent trees that are in the public, view, and just give them offer professional advice for free and just say, would you like help planning?
And it may result in a savings if we can develop a group of landowners that want trees done at the same time. There's probably some kind of volume discount that we could, that the service could offer the landowners. And
it does relate to the tree nursery topic, which comes up at some point here in this list, which is, if the town had a tree nursery, then we also could help manage costs that way.
Yeah, I'll say, I think that is totally possible. Like, we have a lot of ash trees in our neighborhood. They just were like popular in the 80s, I guess, as we all know. And when we had ours initially treated, I went around to everybody in the neighborhood and like had the arborist come out and do like an education day. And then he did offer like a discounted price if we would like bulk treat trees. And if it's like a pretty windy, cool day and the trees are respirating, the treatment is super fast and they can do like a bunch all at once.
Reed, in reference to your tree nursery thing, I don't know, I guess I'd be more in favor, due to costs, for the town to join a regional group to get a nursery growing, going in, Chittenden County or something like that, rather than us taking on the full investment of multiple people and equipment and land. And I think, regionally it would make a lot more sense, or even, renew the state nursery systems that was abandoned, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. Having access to nursery trees through a public sponsored program instead of just privately going out and purchasing trees, I just feel like is a better long-term plan for us.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it costs wise, it would be a fair bit cheaper than buying them from private nurseries, I think.
Also, I feel like I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry, I get excited about this urban tree stuff.
Yeah, there are a lot of places that give away trees too. Like the Intervale,
Yep,
so.
we actually did a, corporate volunteer day at the Intervale, and so I saw firsthand, we were weeding their, little tree nurseries and then
Mhm.
uprooting them and, you know, and they plant them in these were for riparian zones, which was appropriate given that they were totally flooded.
Mhm.
That was sort of my thought. It was like, does Williston really like have to do that if places like the Intervale
Mhm.
are growing trees? So I think I'm definitely aligned with what you were saying, Gary. Like, let's be part of a collective, you know, rather than we've got a lot of stuff on the Williston agenda. I don't know if finding space for a tree nursery is sort of high on that list, but a collective makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we
Yeah,
can always like prioritize. There's things that we want to do straight away and things that maybe don't need to be done straight away.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like the idea of the collective as well.
it'd be nice to push that forward somehow, because I think unfortunately, it takes years to set something like that up to a point where you get a sizable tree that will grow well and look good in a short period of time.
I think if you say that the goal of joining a collective is to grow trees that will replace the ash trees that are most certainly going to be infested into the future, that's at least a mission statement for why you're doing it. And, you know,
Yeah.
it's an investment in your future, basically.
I mean, it may even be just an investment in the Intervale nursery, or somehow commit to them that we will buy a certain number of trees at a reasonable price.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I happen to know that they are expanding their nursery as well, to increase capacity.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on nursery, tree nursery, town nursery? And the last one is Williston and Bloom.
I like this objective. There's something very small town about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I said I really like seeing Bernie at Corner Quick out
Yeah.
there, and he's always watering his flowers.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm terrible at keeping my flowers alive.
It wasn't hard this year.
Yeah, I should have planted flowers.
Beginning of the year was hard. In the summer.
One thing
Alright.
for me, I'm not really super familiar with this, but it'd be nice to know, some kind of inventory of what's been done and where and how it's supported. I don't know, a little bit more information would be
That's a
valuable.
good point, Gary. I've wanted that as well. The only, the first, when I think about Williston and Bloom, the first places that come to my mind are, like Laura pointed out, Bernie at over here at Corner Quick, which I don't even know if that's Williston and Bloom or if that's just Bernie doing it.
Yeah, it could be just Bernie.
But
Yeah.
the one I do know is the big planting on the corner of Industrial Ave and Mountain View and 2A.
Yes.
That looks really nice. But I don't know where else, I don't know if the Taps Corner stuff is all private or if that's Williston Bloom or where else they do plantings.
Yeah, there's some, I can't remember. The one I always think about is that 2A, because I'm always like coming off Industrial Avenue and waiting
Yep,
a little while.
exactly.
Like, wow, look at all those flowers.
Yeah. You do see them on Maple Tree Road. It goes through Maple Tree Place, which is our road.
Mhm.
So that might well be them. And I think there are some in some of the industrial areas that they look after as well.
I think they also don't they take care of the ones just right here in the village between Route 2 and the library sidewalk?
Yeah,
There's
so-
a couple
Yeah.
along Route 2 here. Yeah, but
And
yeah,
is it-
signage and awareness, public outreach, so
Yeah.
people know would be great.
And who is it? All totally volunteer, and is there any town money involved? I don't really know much about it.
Well, I must admit, I don't know, like, other than the first I knew about this was when I read this particular thing, and just makes you think about all the
Yeah.
things you see around town.
Mhm.
and how there is a body of people behind it, and I think they do pop up in the Observer from time to time.
I would be willing to bet that they have a little description in their part of the town annual report.
Yeah.
That's
that's what
they did. All right, so that, I think that concludes chapter 4. Awesome. I'm glad we were able to look at all that feedback. So that gets us to a little bit behind, but other business and ERF outreach. I did not to get my homework done again. I apologize. Too much going on with my day job. Because Simon knows I tried to get started on it yesterday and then fires came up and then Halloween got in the way. So I'll do my best to try and get that memo done for next meeting. Reed has, however, been doing a great job with his homework on the ERF.
I'm trying.
A lot of progress. I'll turn that one over to you, Reed.
Okay, I'm trying to find my little, all right, let's see here. So I met with Sustainable Williston last Thursday. And boy, did they have ideas to offer, which was great. We came up with a ton of ideas. I also met with Simon so that we could talk a little bit more about like the run of show. So yeah, if you want to go back to the run of show, Simon. So we're getting a little bit closer to like actually how much are we going to talk and about what and with what visuals. So thank you, Simon, for helping us drive toward that. So what we got so far is what's up on the screen. This is an hour of content followed by 15 minutes of mingle time. And that will allow us to advertise it as an hour-long event. But if people want to stay, we'll book the space for an hour and a half, and that allows people to stay and ask questions in private of individual, experts if they want to after the event. There's also going to be some interactive aspects. So as far as like at the 2050 events, so there'll be a map where people can come up and put something on the map. And I'm thinking about allowing people to be able to like write on stickies and put the stickies on something if they have ideas. So they may also after the event want to stay for a few minutes and do that if they didn't have time before the informational portion began. But basically the idea is to do 10 minutes to introduce the event and why it's even happening. Laura has kindly accepted the voluntold position of giving some natural history for Vermont and Williston, because we have wonderful aerial photographs that we can show some of for instance, Catamount and Sucker Brook, going back as far as the 60s, or in the case of Catamount, I think all the way back to 1942. Which is great, but that doesn't tell you what happened before that. So Laura's going to help the audience understand what Vermont's natural areas probably looked like before that time. And then we want to talk a little bit about kind of what Williston's approach to conserving land has been up to this point in terms of like we have zoning regulations and blah, blah, blah. We're going to keep it pretty light and pretty high level. And then we're going to go into some discussion of some specific examples, because I think that's where people will connect to it the most. And Simon and I discussed what we might highlight. And unless something has changed, Simon, I think we're thinking it's going to be this list of 4. So Sipel Farm, which will be an example of something that stayed in private ownership but has permanent conservation. Boomhauer, which became a country park. Jacob Krantz, which has been donated to the town but is not yet some sort of official thing. And then Catamount, which leveraged land trust and grants and private money and all sorts of things. It was all hands on deck to get that to happen. And it is operated by a private entity, but owned by the town. So all these different examples of how it can go differently depending on the parcel. And then just highlight that we have some current initiatives that are ongoing, including Jacob Krantz, but also Abzi Menehenek and others. And And then talk about, okay, so going forward, what are our tools that we can be using for conservation? That's where we'll get into a little bit about the ERF and how it's not perfect. We don't always get full funding. We have, we don't always have funding at the moment when we have a project come up to us. And then I'll team up with Eric to just lay out a little bit more details about what the ERF is and what our strategy as a conservation commission is at this point around trying to get funding for it. And that's where the call to action is, which is just for people to, number one, they need to know that they can come and support the funding of the ERF for the upcoming fiscal year, which it will be just going to the select board. And then B, they should be getting involved in the town plan revision process to say how they want to see conservation funded into the further future. So if they think that it should just be a recommendation each year and the select board should figure it out, great, they should come and say that. If they think that there should be a penny on the tax rate for conserving open spaces, they should come say that. Or if they think there's maybe another way, they should just start showing up and participating in the town plan revisions. So that's the run of show. Are there any questions or observations or suggestions?
One just like comment, which is that when we were working on Catamount, something that came up from a couple like maybe like skeptical eyes was why do we have to raise all this money and get all these grants to buy this property? We have other strategies in town for conservation and we could use those. Like the McCulloughs could just sell their development rights to the land trust, or like you could just let them go through the regular development process and they would be beholden to the open space regulations. And so I think like maybe just having just like knowing that someone might ask that.
Yeah.
Is
yeah,
I think good.
Glazer's a little bit, it's still going through the select board and hopefully it'll be sort of settled, but it will still be very fresh when this event happens. And so I don't want to harp on it, but I do think it's going to have to be brought up as an example of, this is an example where you can kind of see all the different options because they've been playing out in tandem. One was, can we conserve it since it's a high priority parcel? The answer was no, because we just depleted our resources for Catamount. Next is the landowner willing to get less return on their value of their land by just going through some sort of conservation route? No, they want to maximize their financial benefit. Okay, so then it's on to, well, then how does it get developed? And so then it got to go down the specific plan route, and as we did today, we got to discuss what it would look like if it didn't go through a specific plan. So I think it's useful as an example to talk about that not every landowner is going to be open to different pathways. So we have to be ready to be flexible. And we also need to make sure we have really good funding, because the land trust, for instance, is not, they're not interested in the Glazer parcel. It's small, it's isolated, it's not high priority for them on a landscape perspective, but it may be high priority for the town. And if that's the case, then we need to have a funding stream for that.
Totally. There's also, I was thinking like the other donated parcel that has been donated that might be salient for people is the Herskowitz that was like incorporated into Mud Pond, as like that might be like a good one to be like, oh, some of you may be familiar with this mechanism or land that was conserved through this mechanism. Otherwise,
Cool.
Looks great to me.
Any other comments or questions about the run of show?
Is there going to be food?
Yes. Okay. So it's supposed to be a celebration. That was the main recommendation from Kate and Jens and Bob Heiser. They all said, hey, this needs to be a celebration and there needs to be an afterthought of a call to action. So that was one of the main things I asked Sustainable Williston to help with, was how can we make this feel like a celebration? How can we keep people there and make it engaging and fun? And so there were a lot of great ideas, and some of the ideas that we are pursuing are potentially doing some sapling giveaways or seedling giveaways at for the first X number of people who arrive. We may be able to source them ourselves. We may just purchase some. B, we're pursuing having somebody make a cake in the shape of Williston and then do the frosting that highlights open spaces. so that there's both food and something that is pertinent to the topic. Three,
Eric, do you remember when Nicole Grahowski made those cakes for like
Yeah.
clean water day? Those were, I feel
Yes.
that's like what just popped into my head.
mhm.
Yeah, that's going back a ways, Kim.
Is
But
this
they
somebody who
were
might make
like,
a cake for us now?
well,
No,
no, she's like a
it's
state
under
senator in
Maine.
Maine now, but I feel like I can find a photo of one that could be used for inspiration. Like she made
Mhm.
basically a sheet cake and then like decorated it as a landscape and had like cows that like busted through a fence and into a stream. It was, I mean, it was like she like spent a lot of time on it.
Cool. Yeah, and if we can't get a custom shape cake, we can also just get a sheet cake and then do the frosting in the shape of. We can work with even the local Shaw's or Hannaford's bakery to do something like that. So we're trying, and Sustainable Williston is helping to move that forward. We think that would also, again, make it a celebration, Laura. So then another thing that's happening is we're going to have nature sounds playing when people enter. So that's just so it's not like a dead quiet room. So I'm making sure that that happens. And then in terms of public outreach, Sustainable Williston is going to help a lot, but the first step really is for me and Simon to get content up on a page on the website so that we can refer to that from everything that we advertise. But from the Sustainable Williston side, there's going to be Front Porch Forum posts with just kind of perspectives about, this is one reason you might want to attend this event if maybe you're a landowner and you're thinking about how to conserve your property or your estate. Two, if you're concerned about the rate of development and you'd really like to better get to understand how the town conserves land to balance that, that'd be another reason, and so on. So there's probably, half a dozen or more that we could come up with that are different reasons somebody would consider attending. And we're going to try to highlight that through Front Porch Forum. And then Sustainable Williston has a Facebook presence and can create a Facebook event so that people can actually hit RSVP. So we can kind of get a little bit of a gauge on how many people might come. And we're going to facilitate that. What am I missing? Our speakers, I think at this point, everybody is given a thumbs up on that, that they're okay speaking. What am I missing, Simon? Yeah, Laura.
I guess the event name, I don't know if you settled on
Oh,
that.
yes. So I saw you just sent you sent an email about it and I had not read it.
I was fine with either one, honestly.
Yeah. So some of the names that had been recommended included celebrating and conserving Williston's open spaces, which is a little bit more bland, with a subtitle of or followed with a community outreach events co-sponsored by Williston Conservation Commission and Sustainable Williston. And then another one that's a little bit more playful is Wild About Williston, a celebration of past and future conservation. That one's a little bit more fun and catchy. I feel like the Conservation Commission, since we're the public body, if you will, really should make sure we're good with the name.
I like the second one better.
Wild About Williston.
Yeah, I mean, the first one was too long, but to make it kind of catchy would be good.
Okay.
Yeah, keep it.
Yes, we wanted it to be catchy, but also not be misleading. Like we didn't want to use things like the great outdoors or different things that aren't necessarily about wild lands or conservation. So cool. So is everybody okay if we go with Wild About Williston?
I am.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Do you have a date, Reed?
Oh yes, so this is going to be 12/7.
Okay.
Tentative start time is 7 p.m. and with hopes that allows families to, get kids home, get kids fed, things like that, and then be able to come. It's not intended for kids to come, but of course, everybody will be welcome. I'm still pursuing 2 spaces. It's mostly about technology at this point because I just am worried that people aren't going to be able to see the maps that we show and the aerial photographs that we show very easily. If we have like a small screen or we have a projector, but it's poor quality. So I'm hammering out between the Federated Church meeting space and the meeting room at the library. So today I'm supposed to get some more details on what they have for a projector at the library because they do still have a projector screen that can be pulled down, and I just want something that's big and clear so that people can see it. It should be basically dark out. So I think we should be able to dim the lights and really make that visible. I'm a little bit worried that I heard, and Simon, you were at the 2050 event at the Federated Church, but I heard that the screen is not particularly huge.
No, it's not a big, it's like a glorified TV.
Yeah, that made me worried. So
We did, so the meeting room that we had for the library on Saturday, it's a bigger screen. It's not that big, but because the room's smaller and
it feels bigger.
It feels bigger. But again, you're going to run up to the capacity issue you've highlighted there.
We do have to keep in mind that with all the 2050 events and then with the community center scoping study events and everything, I think there's going to be a little bit of public burnout on these types of things. So I do worry that that's going to reduce our attendance. So I'm a little bit less worried about having too many people, and I'm a little bit more worried about making sure that the people who come can really see everything well. So at the moment, I have to say I'm actually leaning a little bit toward the library, but I'm trying to just finalize the technology piece of it and make sure it's going to be a good experience.
Awesome.
I think we could
Thanks,
like
Reed.
Catamount community like education and outreach in that room and used that screen to do like big maps of the Catamount property, and it worked well.
Okay. Yeah. I'm more familiar with the technology in the DAML meeting room, and so I'm a little bit more comfortable with that. And they also have both options of a pretty large TV. I don't know if it's 70-inch or something, and then also they have the projector. And for maps, I do think the projector might actually be a little bit better because maps are not necessarily landscape format. We can zoom in landscape, but sometimes like the shape of Williston is more tall than it is wide. So when we're looking at maps of Williston, it may be nice to have something that's a square anyway. So anyway, I'm finalizing this space.
Reed, thanks. This has been a huge lift. You put a lot of time into it, so thanks for all
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
Just one quick question, and then we should move on to the last 5 minutes we have here. I can't remember, did we talk about the town hall room next door here as an option?
I haven't pursued it.
Select board meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that happening on the same night?
No, they meet on Tuesdays.
On Tuesdays. Yeah, so no, I haven't looked into the Beckett room.
Right. I'm just thinking that might be another option too.
True, yeah.
Yeah, and just one more thing is, I do have my slide and I do think it would look better on a bigger screen, but that's just one slide.
Mm-hmm, yep. Awesome. Well, if anybody has further interest or you want to help out at the event, just reach out. There's going to be plenty of things that need hands or paying attention to. So
Okay.
it's coming together.
Reed asked on the chat, will the meeting be available online as well and recorded for future viewing?
So the plan right now is not to record the event.
Yeah.
However, all of the maps that we show and resources that we show can be linked on a page on the website for kind of self-paced viewing. And we could provide commentary on that page on the website as well if people wanted to get a summary of what was covered at the event. There's also talk of maybe a follow-up event next year. If there's an area that we find a lot of people are interested in, we could have a more deep dive on a particular topic.
Cool.
Laura,
Thanks.
I just had one comment for your, just a second here. You're probably aware that Walt Pullman did a place-based study in Williston, maybe, I don't know, you guys that were around maybe 8 or so years ago, that he has great slides of a long history of Williston that might be helpful, and I'm sure he'd probably be willing to share that with you if you could find it.
Oh, that's a great idea, thanks.
All right, future agenda items. What up? So we have the ERF budget memo, I will get that done for the next meeting. We'll just need to be on the agenda for earlier, because I have to leave
Okay.
before 8 next time.
Time is, conflict has come up for me on that day as well.
Okay,
I may have to leave early,
on the 15th,
yeah.
okay. What else do we have that we need to cover? So we've got flagged, town plan chapter 9, we're gonna do the survey thing, approach for
Yeah.
that again. And then Mud Pond is, or Fellowship of the Wheels coming in, talk about Mud Pond.
They wanna do a little reroute for the adaptive thing on the country park side and just have a general catch up about how the improvements have been received so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And then,
I mean, I don't need to do that on December 15th, they're not gonna do it till next year, so we
okay,
can bump that.
Okay, let's bump it then, because
Yeah.
if I need to jump early,
yep,
I may not be a quorum.
sounds good. And then, looking ahead to December, we'll have some more pre-apps, chapters, a couple chapters in the, town plan, the annual report.
637 Christmas Lane is where Terry lives.
Okay.
And she mentioned last time that their intention has always been to give the land to the town.
Mhm.
So they own like circa 200 acres up there, 30 of it's in Williston and the rest is in Richmond, so they just wanted to start that process.
Okay, great,
Wow. Yeah.
Yes.
all right. We're just about out of time. Any other quick things we can cover?
Just
A minute.
two more events of Williston 2050, so, one this Saturday and one next Thursday. The Thursday one's sold out or is filled. We're not selling tickets, but yeah, so there's still the opportunity to participate on Saturday if you'd like. And the survey is gonna be going out shortly, so that's something you can also complete if you can't get to one of the events.
Okay, great. Good to hear that they're getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, they're good. They've been fun so far.
Great.
And then, all right, is that everything? Podcast.
Podcast. Yeah. Who's got a podcast?
Steve
Everybody's got a
Shepherd.
podcast.
Anyway, yeah.
For real.
Listening to.
It's all part of the 2050 effort.
I see.
All right,